Can you hear me? Good morning. Before I start the class today, I need to make a correction. I think I made a mistake last week. There was a question regarding whether Dart is multi-threaded. I think my clarification, I don't think was correct. So I wrote a small note on this. If you go to lesson 8, in that, going down here. Okay, I made that correction, so you can have a look at it. Actually, the way Dart and also JavaScript is working, technically, or we can say electronically, they are single-threaded. Although they simulate the multi-threaded system, technically they use one thread from the CPU. But of course, we have the simulation of multiple things working at the same time, right? Now, how does it work? I have given some explanation. Synchronous programming is where you do one task, then you go to the next task, and then you go to the next task, like that. Whereas asynchronous programming gives the view that you are doing more than one thing at the same time. So JavaScript and Dart give us two mechanisms to handle this. One is where we can wait till something happens, right? In fact, there are two keywords, async and await. So the await will wait for the task to be completed and then move on. So we can combine these two together. In fact, Dart has something called the future, where something will be happening in the future so that we can move on with your code. So I given a nice example here. So the code has two parts, right? Let me zoom in a little bit. So I've also given the file name here, main code and the library code. So I've also given the path. Now, for example, this goes to the lib path where all my libraries will be saved. And the name of this function is called fetch data. By the way, there is a filing convention, or rather naming convention. File name, if you have different words, you need to separate it with an underscore. And if you have a similar function, you have to use camel casing. That is, every other word will start with a capital letter. That's why if you notice here, fetch data has an underscore in between, and fetch data function has a D capital. So what's happening here is basically it is delaying this function for 5 seconds. I put 5 seconds because it's a long time. So when I call fetch data function, it waits for 5 seconds. Now this is like, connecting to a web server somewhere and trying to download the data. Right? So it takes time. Maybe not 5 seconds, but takes some time. Now, so the fetch data function is taking 5 seconds. That's it. And our main function, we don't want to wait for 5 seconds before we move on to the rest of the code, right? Now, let's say you have a button where you press to download data from the internet, and you press the button, and if it is stuck, if the user interface is stuck until the data is coming back, then you feel the application is slow. So if you notice here, what is happening here is I'm calling the fetch data function, which is part of the future test, right? Which is actually, this is called the namespace. So fetch data is, I've renamed the namespace as future test. So future test dot fetch data, which is this function here. So if you notice, I have something called then. I also have something called on error here. So first you will see this here, testing.async await system, right? And then it will call the fetch data. Now, since I've already wrapped it with the future, I'm not using async await here, but the fact that I'm using the future, it will wait separately. So Actually, this is a very interesting code because you will see this line first, then you will see this line. Although we have some code in between, you will see this line immediately. That's the beauty of asynchronous programming, right? So after the 5 seconds, you will see this line, right? Data fetch after 5 seconds. So which means we continue coding, we continue our program without waiting on the main thread. So if you notice here, I'm not using any wait or async in the main code, right? So this is the beauty of using futures for the asynchronous programming under Dart. This is very common. We use it pretty much all the time when it comes to connecting to the internet, even reading files, right? So I've given a big explanation on how it is working, right? So please have a look at that. I will share it also here. Okay, so I've shared in the notepad. Right, now today, I have few things to cover under Dart, and then we'll jump into Flutter today to see how Flutter works, and we'll start designing some component using Flutter. Okay, so let's jump to our notepad, VS Code rather. So I also showed you last week how to create the projects, right? So it's a Shift Control P, and then you go to Dart New Project, and then start with a basic project proposal here. So I use console application so far. Let me open something from last week. The Dart, I wanted to share a few things. Okay. One is this future test. So this is the code I showed you a while back, right? So this is the main code, and this is the future date. So if you can see, this is 5-second delay. Now, when I run this code, look at what is happening in the terminal output, right? So we will see this first, right? And let's look at the steps of the text. Right, there it is. It says testing Dart, but now look at this. This line execute immediately. So our main code did not wait, right? Data fetch came, which is here after 5 seconds. So this is the beauty of futures. And I think we already saw the REST APIs and things like that. So here's the basic REST API. No, I think I'll need to explain you what is the REST API. Okay, now that is future. So let me also show you what is happening here. Now, when it comes to the production level or the real sort of mobile application, we always connect to the internet, either to authenticate the application or to download application and download data and things like that. So in doing so, we use certain packages. In this case, we are using the HTTP package. There are other packages. Now, for example, we also use convert here. Then there is input-output package for files and things like that. So this particular example, I'm using a website called JSON placeholder. Okay. What it does is it gives us JSON data. What is JSON data? It's basically a free, I can't use the word database, but it's structured data coming from this URL. Okay. And what I'm doing here is getting that data and basically printing it here. right? I'm using an array kind of thing. Actually, it's a name value pair. Let me take you to this website.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
In the previous example of the future, what
Mhm.
if we replace 5 with 0 second? Will it execute immediately?
Oh, okay. There is a question about, okay, let me go there. So you're saying here, if I put 0, what happens? Yeah,
Yes, sir.
it will. Let's see. Okay, now I still says 5 because I have, I didn't change the text here, right? In fact, to understand that, let's put some numbers here. 1, now according to what we are seeing here, this should be number 3, right? So this should be number 2 because that is the second step we are doing according to the usual programming practice, right? So if I go here, let me run that. You can see number 1 is running, number 3 is running, and then number 2 is running. Because number 2, which is fetching data, is running on a separate section. So I can't use the word thread, but simultaneously, right? Although I set 0 time here, it still runs parallel. So what happens here in the program, it runs this first, and since it is a future, it runs what is after the future immediately. And then it gives a chance to this guy to run separate. So although it is taking 0 second, that is almost nothing, it still come back afterwards. So I'm going to keep the example as it is with number 5. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. Let's go to JSON placeholder. Now, this is the website. There's a guide here. So please go through the documentation. So it uses another actually one called Fetch, which is available on all browsers. But I think I explained this to you last time. So we are using this data post, right? And it comes to us as a JSON data. Right? For example, this is a JSON data, right? So what we are going to do here is we are going to use the left hand of that to show the right hand of the. So left hand is the name, right hand is the value. Right. So this has lots of example about, I'm only reading. So it has examples where you can update, delete, and also create a resource. So these are called mockup sites. So you can use these sites to see whether your application API is working. We are also using a technique known as the REST API, right? So how does that work? So the REST API is an API where we can easily speak to a web server outside our application, right? So we use words like get, post, put, delete, that kind of words. Okay. So what happens here is we have a client. Generally, it's either a mobile application or a website, and we speak to a server. Right now, this server might be running Microsoft IIS, Apache, engines, whatever. So we don't care what the language is running inside the server as well. We don't care. So we may be running PHP, maybe JavaScript here, maybe C# here, Python here. Server may be running Java or PHP. We don't know, or we don't care actually. We use text data to exchange between these two clients. So if I want to get something, I use the word get, meaning I'm not modifying any data on the server. I'm only reading the data. So I can either get a list of resources or I can get one resource. So that's one. I can either get a list of resources or one resource. For both, I'm using the get. It's called the get method. If I want to create a new resource, a new item, I use the post method. And if I want to update one resource, so post and put only one resource at a time, either use put or patch. Some people use put, some people use patch, right? Both are, I would say, equally same. And if I want to delete one resource, I use the delete method. Okay. So it's pretty simple way to use it. Now, for example, here, if you notice, getting one resource, right? So there is a one here. This is the record ID. So when I say give me post, right? And it gives me one record. See, ID is one. That's this record. And if I want to get all the resources, I don't put a one here. I just say post. By the way, the word post it also has a meaning. This is the name of the model. I have post, I have users, I have albums, I have all kind of stuff. I can use all that. And in order to create, I use the, now if you notice here, we didn't give a method name. By default, it's a get method. Now, if I want to create a resource, I have to say what the method is. So I have to say method is post. And then again, I don't give ID because I don't know the ID until I create it. So all I need to do is pass some information. So I'm passing a title, body, and a user ID. And when I do that, it'll come back to me with the created resource. Okay, now I know it's 101. That's the new ID for the resource I just created. Similarly, if I want to update something, I have to give the ID, which ID I am updating. And again, I'm using the put method and the data I want to update. I will also get updated information when I do that. Patching also same. I need to do that, and then I get the information again here. Deleting, again, method is delete. I must give a ID. Right. So this guy also has other things like filtering also. Now, if you want to get all the posts by one user ID, you can do it as well. Right. So there is albums, there are users, there are user albums, user to-dos, and user post. So all these are called the endpoints, API endpoints, which we can use to get information. So heading back to our program, so I have two examples. One is, this one is a very basic example where I'm just getting the data and showing it. So I'm getting one record here. Getting one record and showing the title and the body of that record. So if you notice, I am here using fetch data as a async and await method here, right? So if you notice here, I'm not using any async anything in the main code, because main code is my main code. And on the fetch data method, where I'm connecting to the internet to download, I don't know how long it will take. It will take 1 second, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 1 minute. I have no idea. So here also, of course, if I want, I can have another text. I can say, let's put one here. Let's put number 3. That's the third step, right? This will run in okay. I'm gonna run this. Right there, testing REST API. This will run immediately. Oh, my spelling is wrong. Yes, this data came from the internet, title and also body, right? We don't know how long it took. You can find out if you want to, but well, we don't care. So if you notice again, how are we doing that? So generally, it's good practice to keep the URL in a variable outside so that it doesn't change. And then we pass on that URL here to the HTTP controller, and we use a get method, you see. And here we are saying await. That means connect and await. Wait until you get the data. So when you get the data, response will be available. The response variable has the data. And sometimes you need to go and study about the REST API. So there are also status codes it is giving as per the result. Let me also show that to you. That's called HTTP status code. There are actually, we don't need to know everything, but it's good to know what status codes are there. It is grouped according to 100 at a time. So 100 to 199 is informational responses. 200 to 299 is successful responses. 300 to 399 redirection. 400 to 499 client problems. 500 to 599 is server problem. That's how it is designed, right? And there is a one for everything. Say 100 is continue. Actually, we generally don't use 100 one. We use this. 200 is very famous because it says your request is successful, right? And if you're calling the post method, you might get 201 saying created. So likewise, these are the famous ones. Redirection also, sometimes when you are requesting, let's say something, but the URL is updated. So you might get a redirected, like for example, moved permanently, like that. And the next famous one is 400. So you get a 400 bad request because you are requesting something, but that is not there in the server, right? Say the ID, you are requesting ID number 0. There is no such thing called ID number 0, so you will get a bad request there. Or there are servers that require authorization, like username, password, and you're accessing something that requires username, password, and you're not sending that. So in that case, you get unauthorized. If it is to do with any payment, you might get 402, payment required. This is also famous, 403. The client does not have access rights. So you are authenticated, but you are not authorized. So you cannot access that. This is also very famous, 404. Not allowed or not found. That means you requested, actually this is similar to 400, is that 400 is very particular because request is bad. Maybe you have sent some wrong information. But 404 says your information request is correct, but we don't have that information. Okay, so that is there. And this is also very famous, 405, method not allowed. You're trying to delete, for example, and you can't delete because you don't have authorization, something like that. Then 409 and 408 also very famous. It says you lost the connection for a while, because sometimes when you are connected, there is something called session. There is also cookies. So they have timeout things. So your session may be valid for, let's say, 1 minute, or your cookie may be valid for 1 day or something. So when you come back to the same site, maybe another day, you get a timeout thing. And then the most famous other one is 500, internal server error. You are requesting something, but the server had gone bad. There is a problem with the server, right? That means the backend program has a problem. So 400 mean you're requesting client program has a problem. 500 onward mean server backend program has a problem. So these are very famous status codes, and that's what we are getting, or we're actually checking in our code. We were not checking everything. We are only checking 200, right? So if the status code is 200, that means everything is good. If not, that is else, something is wrong. Okay. if you've learned about try-catch blocks, where we also use throw, right, exceptions. Here we are throwing an exception. And this is the message. Failed to load data and status code. Maybe some problem, right? We can simulate that, and let's say, not here, here, let's put 0 and see whether I'm getting a error or the data. Okay, I'm getting exception. Failed to load data, status code 404. There you go. Now we understand what 404 means. 404 is not found, right? So I'm requesting 0, or maybe let's say no large number. I should get the same thing, right? Yes, 404. Because there's no record of that sort, right? But there is number 10 available. I think there are 50 records or so. No, 100 records are there, right? Yes. And I can also say record ID here if I want to. There it is, ID number 10, right? I can also play along, because there was another one called users, right? Say users, let's look at the first user. And there I might not have title and body. I may have to change something else. So for that, I had to go back to the website and see whether I am getting users. Switch back to this. So you can actually test post here. All the posts are coming. If I say post 1, I get 1 post. So similarly, if I get users as the endpoint, okay, let me this one. I get all the users, right? So there are 10 users. And if I want 1 user, I need to just put that number. Let's say number 10 or number 2, number 1. So this is the ID number 2. So you see, I have to use these things: name, username, email, right? So I switch back to my program here. So I'm going to get name and email. So here also I have to change the text. So I'll go back, run it. There we go. First person is Leanie Graham, and this is the email address. Okay, so that's another example of how to use these endpoints. Right, so we covered features and also how to access the API. Now, there is also another rather better way of accessing these APIs. So that is, let me open the folder, where you use okay, let me show this to you. Right, this is called, we use this mechanism is called data or typecasting, where we convert the data. The data that we are getting is actually a text file, right? It's in JSON format, and we convert that into a list, a collection here, right? The advantage is now we can apply all the method from the collection. So if I'm using list collection method, I can use, if you remember, I could use length, I could use transforming this to something else. All that can be done. So here I'm getting all the post. All right. And then I can, actually I'm then to see whether I'm getting it 200. Oh, by the way, notice I have moved my API URL after URI pass to this variable called API URL, which I'm getting here. And I'm checking to see whether I'm getting 200. That is all good. Then I am decoding my JSON, which is coming from the body of the response variable. And you see, as list. So I'm transforming that. This is called typecasting. Transforming the data type into list. And I don't know what kind of type I'm getting into the list, so I put dynamic there. Isn't it? It can be anything. So it's a dynamic data type, actually dynamic record to the list data type. And I have an example first. So here I'm getting the first element. Okay, how do I get the first element? Now this is just an array. Data list is just an array. So if I say show me the 0, I will see the 0th element. And post ID is there, title is there, body is there. And if I want to look at all the elements, I can get that here using data list dot for each. If you remember how we use for each, well, that's what you're doing. I could have used the arrow function. I'm not, because I want to process some more. So here I put a for each and showing all the titles of my post. If I have an issue other than 200, I will show this one, right? And by the way, the try catch block, I'm also here using something else called finally. Now, finally will run whether your try catch block is successful or fail. Normally, what we do is we put the data requesting, like for example, opening the client method inside the try catch block, try block, and close that under the finally block, so that we don't have any memory leak or things open, not closed, and stuff like that. So here, of course, I'm doing it outside the finally. So this example is much better than the previous one because we are transforming the data to something that we will be actually using in order to process it. So this is the same, right? No change. So I'm going to run this. There it is. All the titles. This is the beginning. This is the first element, as it says, right? And here, all the element titles are here, right? So let me also see data list. See, I can also do length to find out how many records are there, right? So probably I can say is that? Oh, actually, no, it's not. Oh, maybe I can immediately show it in a print. Made a mistake here. There you go. Number of element 100, right? Because there is a dot here, I need to put a curly bracket to say that it's part of the whole thing, right? So this is the proper way of actually handling the data from the internet. You generally transform it to something that you can use within the self. Now, this is also actually, there is one more step you can do. That is, you can in fact create a custom data type. We use classes for that. So you can create a custom data type and then map that into that custom type. Like for example, if you are reading a post here, in this case, you can create a custom data type for the post. And there you can use each element the way you want to, right? So it's a bit of an advancing, but in production code, that's what you do. You transform the data into your custom data type. Now, right now, I'm using a very generic list data type here, but you can actually have a data type, for example, called post or users or album, and then start using that data type directly rather than depending on the basic built-in data types. Before we jump into Flutter, I want to show one more thing that is about reading files. Now, this is another very common feature that we'll be doing time to time. Now, I have, okay, not this one. I have a very simple data array here, right? This is a text file which is inside the asset folder. Now, if you look at my project, right? So this is my project. Now, generally, we have an asset folder to keep all the assets. So I have a file called cars.json. So this is a JSON array. I also was experimenting with another one called the person. So this is another record. So I have name, age, and then the cars is another array again. So array of a record. So I'm not using this, I'm using cars. Right now, the idea here is to read this file and process it. So this is my main code where I am reading my information. Okay. Now mylib is the future to read the file. Okay. So here I'm using my async code. I have to say where the file is. So file is inside the assets and the name of the file is cast.json. And I'm reading that file into the variable called file. Okay. So how do I do that? Is by using the read as string. So the whole file get read at once and stored into the variable called file. So I do this in a future. And then in order to access that, I'm running this code here. So I'm saying mylib.read file. So that is read file here, this one. If it is successful, I'll say showing all at once, right? So I'm dumping the whole thing to the screen, or I can decode that data because it's a JSON as a list. See, transforming the data, just like how I did previously. And then I can process one at a time using for each. Okay. So if there is any error happen, I have this on error. Whatever the error file, it will be there. Now, again, this line is there because I'm running a parallel process for this guy to read. So let's run this and see what happens. Reading a file with async await, this line execute immediately. That's on the last line. And then showing all at once is basically this one. It's dumping the whole variable. And then showing one at a time is where I'm processing one element at a time. Okay. So this again is a very common practice where we use, for example, settings in a file. Say a person might turn on and turn off certain settings, like I might turn on dark mode I might turn on or turn off notification, things like that. So if you want to store it locally, you might use if you're not using any database locally, you can use a very simple JSON file like this for your settings. Okay, so you can read and write. Now here I'm only reading. You can also do the writing as well. So I thought this will be another example for your production line. Okay, now I guess it's time to jump into Flutter programming. So I have some text on Flutter here. So where do we start? Well, we have the instructions. We go to the Flutter website, flutter.dev. It has everything you need to get started, right? So you go to docs and getting started, and go to Windows or Mac or Linux, depending on your platform, and just go through this instruction. So you need to download this file and do some configuration with your computer. You have to update your path and all that. If everything is fine, you can, by the way, Flutter also requires Dart, because Dart is a programming language. Flutter is the UI component that runs on top of Dart. And everything is fine. If you type Flutter Doctor, it should show that everything is okay, right? If you're using Android Studio, yes, that also can be done. If you're not planning to generate any actual mobile phone, you don't need an Android Studio. Maybe you can install these things separately also. But if you are interested, if you're serious about mobile phone application, I highly recommend installing Android Studio. It's very easy to update your SDKs using Android Studio. You can do it manually also, but it's a lot of headache. One part is updated, the other part is not updated, because it depends on Java also. So you have to configure Java SDK, Androids, and then Android SDK separately, and there are so many configurations you have to do manually if you don't have Android Studio. But if you have Android Studio, it's just one button, press and say update, and that's it. It will take care of all the things. And also remember, Android requires licensing approval, meaning you have to agree, or you have to accept the license. Otherwise, it won't work. So here's the command: Flutter Doctor Android license. This will accept all the licenses at once. Again, you can do this from Android Studio also. But if you are getting some errors regarding licenses, you need to run this command in your console. That will accept all your licenses. Right. This page is all you need to read. So it also has how to configure your editor. In my case, I'm using VS Code. I could use Android Studio also, but I'm using VS Code. It's simple and fast. It also shows you how to configure it. This is about VS Code. If you have Android Studio or IntelliJ, you can read this part. Right. So essentially, you have to install some extension to your VS Code. So there is a Flutter extension, Dart extension, things like that. And if everything is fine, you should be able to press Control Shift and P, which will give you, just like Dart, asking you to create a new project, right? And if all goes well, you can try do a test drive and create a new application and see whether everything's fine. You can also use either a simulator or the web browser to run. So my recommendation for today is don't worry about installing any simulators. Just go with the browser, and that's enough for our testing for today. It's the fastest and the simplest, right? But if you're brave enough, you want to get it onto a mobile phone, well, no problem, you can do it as well. One reason why we are going with Flutter is this particular reason, hot reload. This is the fastest way to develop a mobile application, because when you make a small change, it will automatically reload your application on the mobile. Oh, by the way, if you don't want to install a simulator, you can plug your Android phone through a cable, and then you can run it on the phone itself without running it on a simulator. That also is possible. Okay. And then it goes on to writing your first app and whatnot. So I have given you a very, very basic application called the Hello World in Flutter, right? So let's try to see this, try to get it going and see whether we can get the Flutter working. So I'm going to switch to VS Code. I'm going to close this. Close. Hold. Right, I'm blank. I'm having a blank VS Code. So Shift Control P gives me this, and I'm going to select this time Flutter. And again, I have multiple options available here: application, empty application, skeleton application. So I am going to select empty application. Of course, I recommend you first try with application. But since we are going to start from absolute basic, I'm going to get it with empty application. So like our Dart, you need to select a folder. So I'm going to get this one. So you need to give a name for this. Let's call it demo1. Enter. And this is going to generate everything you need for your Flutter application. So I'll wait for a while until it creates all the folders for me. I suppose now this folder structure is not new to you now, isn't it? This is all Dart, right? And also, I just saw a message here. It's saying a new version of Flutter is available. If you want to update your Flutter, you just need to say Flutter upgrade, and that's it. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to close this here. Okay. So this is my Hello World application in Flutter. So let's observe what do we have here. So starting off with, we have an Android folder. This is where Android related information is saved. This is where the Apple related information is saved. So if you're on a Mac, you can open the Xcode project, this one here, right? It'll open this on a Mac. Or if you are on Android Studio, you can open it from here, right? And then build your Android application. There are other platforms available, Linux available, Mac OS available, in case you want to run it as a web-based application, right? Windows application or a web application. So all the platforms are available for us. Okay. And PubSpec is where our dependencies are installed. So I don't have anything special here. There's a README file as well. Okay, so I go back to my Dart code. The Dart code is inside the lib. If you remember our Dart project, we had lib and bin, bin. So here we don't have a bin, but we have a lib. All right, so I am just going to run this and then come back and talk about the rest of the information. So this is all object-oriented stuff we have. This is my main Dart, and I hope you remember this guy, right? Main. Okay. And we had print and various things here from our Dart class. But here, since we are in Flutter, what is going on? We have something called run app. Okay. To that, I am passing a class called main app. So the main app class is within my main code, and it is extending stateless widget. So this is all basic object-oriented information. Okay. And here I'm passing on to my main or my parent constructor. Okay, that's main app. Then I have override. What am I overriding? The build method of the main app. Now, in Flutter, we are using a concept called widget. Okay, what is a widget? A widget is any gadget that we can show on the screen. Anything that we can show on the screen is called a widget. It might be a very small element, or it might be the whole screen. It might be small component, whatever, right? So to that, we need to pass something called a context. That's what is on the screen. And the build method has something called a return. So it is returning something to the main app, and that return goes into run app. So that's how it works. So since I'm using a widget here, it uses another concept called material app. Now, material is a UI kit from Android, Google rather. They use it everywhere, including Gmail to Google Drive to their Android mobile application. It's a fantastic framework to build mobile applications. And there, under material app, I have something called the home, right? So home is like the home page. Inside that, I have a scaffold folder. In the scaffold folder, I have other information, body. Inside the body, I have a center. Inside the center, I have a child. The child has a text class. Now, by the way, these are all classes, okay? If you go down right at the bottom, we have the text class, which is inside the center class, which is inside the scaffold class, which is inside the material app, right? Which you are passing on to run app. Now, when I press the run button, see what happens. Okay, I have 4 choices. I can run it as a browser-based application. I can run it as a Windows desktop application. My laptop has 2 emulators, actually 1 emulator. I could run it on an emulator also. Now, I told you I want to keep it simple and fast. So I'm going to use the Edge browser. And let's see what is happening now. Okay, I hope you can see the screen here. On my right-hand side is my preview screen using Edge browser. And you can see hello world here. On my left is the code. Okay. Now, so if I change something here, see what happens. I'm going to press save. There it's doing something called hot reloading. So it is immediately building the application on the right-hand side, which is fantastic, right? Now I can basically do any changes to my code and see it happening immediately on the right-hand side. So this is the power of Flutter. Now, before we jump into anything, we need to understand why we have so many functions here. Okay. Now, for example, if you notice hello world from Flutter is on the center of the screen. Now, the way we learn, say, HTML or anything else for that matter, is we change something called properties of existing components, right? Now, if you are looking at building a GUI with Java, you click on the element and then you change the property to left or center or right. But here, the text element does not have that property. Instead, we need to put it inside another element called center. Now, to show you what I'm talking about, let me erase one bracket and bring this here directly to the body. Okay, now I remove the center part. Now let's see what happens. I'm rebuilding. Do you notice here? The hello is on the top left now. It's not centered. So if I want to center it, I need to put this inside the center tag. Right? So that is why we have multiple folders. And we also have something called scaffold. Basically, the scaffold gives us some information, not just the body, but so many others we can use into design our mobile application. So I'm going to share a document with you. Okay, so this document I will upload. I can have a look at it. So right now, as of today, it's version 1. So please check the version when I upload it there. I might update the versions. So it explains what is Flutter, and then also how to install. I've also given a lot of links here, so please go to the link and find out the latest information. So that's much more updated. Also, a little bit about the architecture of Flutter. I think we need to discuss that now since we've done our hello world. Okay. So look at this. Flutter is not a language. Dart is the language. Flutter is a UI toolkit. Okay. Although we use Flutter all the time, it's just a UI toolkit we are using. And the programming is done completely using the Dart programming language. So if you look at the architectural layers of how it works, right? Now here are the layers. There are 3 primary layers when it comes to Flutter-based mobile application. The top layer is the framework itself. So in fact, they have 2 separate stacks, in fact, layers. One for Android under the material layout, and the other one is for iOS, Apple, under the Cupertino layout. Now you see, both of them use the same widgets. Only the user interface is different. User interface for Apple versus user interface for Android is different, but widget is the same. Okay. And then there is a rendering part. Now we'll get down to the detail to understand what is going on. So before you run or write any code, it's very, very important to understand what is happening under the hood. Okay. Otherwise, anyone can just start Flutter, install Flutter, throw something in and build something out of nothing. But that's not the correct way to build a Flutter application. You need to understand what is happening behind the scene. So there are three parts again. There is animations, there is painting. Animation is movements. Painting is basically displaying things on the screen. And gestures is about getting user input, like clicks, dragging, touching, stuff like that. And then the entire foundation of Dart. So that's how the top framework is designed. And the engine is written using C++ to make it very fast. It's very, very fast compared to other platforms. So these are the components of the engine. So there is rendering, system event, asset resolution, all that is there. Now, then there's also another very important one, platform specific pieces. Now you notice our application had multiple platform support, right? Just one program has multiple support. So for embedding into multiple platforms happens from here. It's called the embedder. Whether it is a Windows desktop application, a browser application, Android application, Apple application, it's all controlled here. Okay. And if you look at one app like we did today, the Hello World app, how does that part work? So again, you can identify some of the pieces together as a layer. Okay. So the first part is the Dart application, the code that we wrote. Then that code is part of a framework called Flutter, right? So both of them are Dart layer. Then we have the engine where it speaks to the hardware, right? Written using C++. And then that engine has another piece for the particular platform you are using. That's where the embedder is coming. And you notice the runner, right? The runner is here. Where is that? Right? So that's the piece where we are running the application on the platform. Now, in my case, I'm running it as a browser application on Edge. Right? So this is platform specific. This is platform agnostic. That means these things work on any platform. All right. So I'll share the document. So it's explain each piece separately. So what is a Dart app? Then what is the framework? What is the engine? What is the embedder? What is the runner? Okay. So we need to understand these components to see what is going on. Now, Flutter had come up with a mechanism where if you take a screen, right, a complex screen, let's say, now, for example, this one is a restaurant mobile app, right? Now, if you look at the pieces here, you can see some information here, some text, then there's a filter here, then there's a picture here, then there are some more text, there's a map location, there's a price, there's a heart here. All these things are pieces that you can put together, right? So this one can be called a card. Card is within another panel here where it has other dates and then also search, whatnot. Okay, so we build one piece at a time using Flutter. Now, these pieces are known as widgets. Okay, so a widget is, I can say, a building block. So we use widgets to build things. So remember, we had a build context here, and we also had scaffold. Now there, we only had the body, isn't it? There is also other things I can do. For example, in this case, I have an app bar. So if I now take this app bar, go back to this one here, it's my code, right? Before the body, if I put the app bar, oh, I think I have to add a little bit more. So inside the home, I have scaffold. Inside the scaffold, I have the app bar. Oh, okay. So now if I save this, now see what happened to the top of this, right? I just added an app bar. It's rebuilding my application, real time. There you go. It is my home page. So I did that just by adding another additional thing called the app bar. Okay. So you see, we are slowly building our mobile application, right? By the way, here it says debug because I'm on the debug mode. I'm not on the production mode. So there are so many other things we can do as well. Now, for example, in this, I have put a button also, right? We'll get to the details, right? Now, if you remember, under object-oriented principles, there was a concept that we discussed called composition. Composition is one class inside another class. So that is the concept we are using under Flutter. That's why we have, now, for example, going back to the hello world, that is why we have, where is my hello world? Oh, here. That's why we have class inside another class. So this is a concept coming from not Flutter or Dart, coming from object-oriented principles called composition. Right, so I can have a class inside another class. So coming back to the widget, in this particular widget, we are looking at adding a column-based mechanism. A column has a vertical system. So column has children. So you can have multiple children in the column. So now just to show you what is going on here, if I replace the column now with my data here, okay, let me also format it now. In the body, I added column class. Column has children. I have one child called text. Okay. Actually, two children. Actually, I have one child called text and another child called elevated button. So I have two children inside the column. So let me save this to see what is happening on the right-hand side. Again, it's rebuilding. There you have it, right? Oh, I remove the center, so that's why it's not centering. Hello world is here, button is here. So if I want to center it, I can actually I can center it with the column itself without putting it into something called the column data. And oh, by the way, now there is also clicking feature. So if you notice, the elevated button has actually two pieces. One is a child called text, where it shows the text A button, and then it is also actually having a function to process when I press. Now let me, since it's a browser, I can go to right click and inspect and go to console here to look at JavaScript output. So if I click the button, now see what happens here. There, it says click, click. Every time I click, the text is getting updated. So what is going on there? Here is this text, click, right? So it's basically printing that onto the screen. So we need to understand actually what is going on with these mechanisms to understand Flutter properly. So composition is one such very important concepts to have. Class inside a class. So for example, center has something called the child. Now, child can have multiple widgets. Okay. So, sorry, center has a child which has one widget. So this widget will be centered inside the screen. Also, you might have another question. Center where? Center in relation to what? Well, that's a good question. Since I don't know this center is part of the entire body or somebody else. So the center will be centering to its parent. Right? So there's a parent-child mechanism. Now, we also need to understand the rendering model very, very well. Now, let's look at this one. Okay. I have a container, right? And then I have inside the container, I have a color called blue. Then I have a child with a row, okay? And the row, earlier I looked at column, now here I'm looking at a row. So the row has children, and I have two children. One is an image, and another one is a text. Okay. So if you look at it, the hierarchy of how this is done. Okay, let me see whether I can take this into my program and show you what is going on. Okay, I'm saving that. Oh, so I'm trying to get an image here. I don't have that image. So you see, this is a row, meaning I have something, and then after that I have another thing. So this is the A, right? Okay. Right? So this is my image and this is my text. Well, I could put the image into my asset folder and then could have shown it there. But anyways, so you understand this is a row, and I can also change this into something else. So let's say, hello. There. Okay. So what are we doing now? We are taking different components and building our application, right? So we need to have a very good understanding of what is available within these things. And oh, by the way, since I'm using VS Code, see what happens when I move the mouse over here. It is showing me all the properties of container. And what does this question mark mean? Question mark mean it is nullable, meaning they are not required. According to this, okay, what is required? Only the clip is required. Everything else is optional. Yeah, so I have color, then I have child under this. Okay, right. So there's a lot to learn. Now, if you go to image, again, there is a SRC, that's the source. There is key, then there is so many things, including loading from the network, right? All these things are available. Now, like I said, this piece of building the widget on the screen is very, very important theory that we need to cover. So I'm taking this as an example, right? So I have container, I have row, I have two children. So if you look at it, the way it is organized, here we are. I have a container, I have a colored box, which is the color, okay? And then I have a row. A row has two pieces. One is the image, the other one is a text. And the text has, these are the values, by the way. So the text has a rich text, that is, some text in it. And the image has a certain image, we call the raw image, loaded from the network in this case. So this is my widget inside the Flutter system. Now, the way it is actually showing on the screen, right? This is how it is showing. Now, inside Flutter, we have two trees. One is the widget tree, other one is the element tree. So the widgets are mapped to the element and the elements are mapped to the widgets. This is like class and object. So I would say element is the object, widget is the class, right? Well, actually, there's one more step to look at the actual object. So this is like a in-between object, we can say elementary. So if you look at the mapping, the container is mapped onto the component element, right? These are components, by the way. The light green ones are called the component. And the rendered object is the actual object that can be shown to the screen, right? So we have a color box, we have a row, then we also have text and image. If you look at the final rendering event that is actually rendered to the screen is the last box here. So here we have the widget tree, we have the element which is mapped to the widget tree, and of that the actual rendering objects are created. So if you look at if you count the number of things we are actually showing to the screen, we have a render decorated box, which is container. Then we have the rendering flex, that is to show either row or column. Then we have an image, then we have a text. So this concept is very, very important to understand when it comes to designing complex stuff. Like, for example, here, if you really notice it, this one line, okay, can be one widget. The second line can be another widget. And then this whole piece can be one widget of another collection of widgets. So we are basically building widget inside the widget. That's how we are doing it. And again, I've given a link to go have a look at it, right? So please read this. This is theoretical stuff which is important. So rather than jumping into our program, please understand the theory also very well. Remember scaffold? Oh, it's a widget, right? So what are the things we can do to our scaffold widget? First, I showed you app bar, right? That's the top bar that we have. Body, we already used it. So body has things that we put in there. Okay. So we had some text and buttons and whatnot. Android also had this concept called FAB, or floating action button. Right? Floating action button is an interesting concept where it gives us a button that is floating on the bottom right hand corner. So let's add this and see how it looks. So that will be after the container. So I'm going to press enter here and paste it there and align it. And here's my screen getting rendered. And you see the add button. So I can press it. It's a button. So where is that icon came from? Well, the icon is coming from here. Icons add. Right? And I'm not doing anything for the press event. Remember press event? Here I'm not doing anything. So in fact, the usual behavior is when you click here, it opens up something on the top. You may have noticed it with Android calendars and emails and things like that. So this is called FAB, floating action button. So I'm not doing anything there. The next one is another interesting one, bottom navigation bar, right? Let's add that as well. Now we are adding all this to our scaffold, okay? So I'm going to locate the end of the floating action button by putting the cursor here. So it is now showing me this is the end of it. So I press enter, paste it, and that is my bottom navigation. So what is bottom navigation? Assertion fail, Flutter. Okay. Item length more than 2. So I need 2 elements for the bottom navigation. So I only have 1, right? So let's copy this guy and paste it again. So I have 2. Did you notice the bottom navigation, right? I can press these things. By the way, I duplicated the first one down here, so I'm seeing the same thing. Let's change it to products. Right, now it says products, but the icon is the same. I need a different icon. Now for that, I can go to material icons. There is, okay, I will come here. This is again from Google, free of charge. You can use it for any work. See, these are the icons we have. Right? You can search, you can find, you can do anything you want. So if you want, say, for example, this one, you need to basically get this name. Okay. Airport shuttle icon, it says. Or let's say this one. My computer is stuck. There's one called agriculture. Let's see that. Okay, so it's agriculture is the name of the icon. So if I go back to my code, and here if I say icons dot, oh, by the way, I can get it by pressing the dot also, right? Then I get everything here. So I can type AGRI, there, agriculture. Press save, and the icon will be updated. There it is, right? So it's blue color because I have clicked on it. So this is the active icon. So when I click here, this should be activated. I've written no code here, so I can't do any action right now. Okay. So my objective was to show you how to build the scaffolding, right? This is the scaffolding. If you minimize all this, you will notice that these are the main pointers of the scaffolding class. Scaffolding of a material app. Now, by the way, this is not how you see an Apple application, right? Apple doesn't have a fab. So if it is on an Apple, you shouldn't be putting a fab, but of course, Apple has the bottom navigation. So we need to, when you're designing, we have to take into consideration, are we going to have Apple customers also? Right. So, oh, by the way, there's one more, drawer, right? The drawer is another interesting one. This will give us a side panel. Let me put that also. So go here, enter. Now, what does that give us? Okay, did you notice there was an icon here on the top left-hand corner? So when I press it, it gives us a side panel here. Okay, so I have no data as such. So I just wanted to show you all the pieces of the material scaffold. So we have app bar, we have a body, we have a floating action button, fab, we have bottom navigation, and then finally we have a drawer. So these are the five main areas of a mobile application on Android. You may or may not use any of it. All these are optional. But the minimum is app bar and body. The rest is all optional. And apart from that, you can also do other things like, background color changing and lots of other stuff. So please go read the documentation for that. So I am copying basically I pasted the thing here without, again, no action. It's just a template. So this is how it looked. Now I took the screenshots, by the way, from my screen here. So I don't know the full height, so I made it shorter. Right. Now before we get to the rest of it, let's jump into some of the gadgets here, right? Okay, so here's a widget. I want to talk about a couple of layout techniques. We already saw briefly what row and column can do. Let me explain you further as to what we can do with this, right? Now, first, let's start with the row. So the row has, okay, let me remove. Right, I have a blank application now, right? The container is blank. So let's start putting things to understand what is going on here. Okay, so I have a scaffold, I have, I have an app bar, and then I have a body, which is now blank. So to the container, let's start adding some stuff into it. So I will have, beginning with that, I will have a row. Okay, or actually not even container. So I'm going to have a row. By the way, R capital because it's a class. Okay. And the row, by the way, has children, right? Row has children. Also, row has alignment, axis alignment. So let's start with the children. You know, children is array, and to that array we are putting text classes, right? So let me copy this directly to the row. Right, I have ABC top left hand corner here. So if I want some alignment, I can do this main axis alignment. So for a row, main axis is vertical, horizontal, right? There we go, right? So main axis is horizontal, and I have given space evenly. Now you can experiment with these things and see what we can do, right? If you want anything else, you can just put the dot here and it will give you everything that is available. Space around, space between, space evenly, start, values. So if I say center, let's see what happens. Yeah, it is centered now, right? Space around. That's another one, right? But since I only have two, so I'm going to say space evenly, right? So that's a row. Okay, that's how we generate rows. In fact, you should go here to look at all these things. It's a very, very important documentation. Right, layouts in Flutter. So I've shared the links with you. Very, very important. So it shows you how the layout is done. Now, if you look at the bottom navigation, there's an icon, there is text, right? And different text and icon take different spaces also. So this is what I spoke about. So there's a container, there's a row, then there are 3 columns, like in here, 3 columns, right? And each column has an icon, and then there is a container, and in that container I have text, right? There's a container and then the text is there. So if you look at the code, that is how it is designed. So this is basically object orientation composition, class inside a class. So these are the examples of how things are done. So this page spoke about material and also Cupertino, right? You see Cupertino theme data. That is for Apple iOS. And this is non-material app. Let's say if you are building something for browser or web or desktop, where you don't want the material, you may have a different way of handling theme. No problem. You don't need to have a theme from material as well. Right. So here's a very good exercise that you can try. How to design this page. So here we are taking one piece at a time. Let's say how to get this stars line. So there are 5 stars, then there is a text here. So to do that, we need to break it down into things. Now remember I showed you this picture. How do we do this? So this explains how that is done. So this is one piece, this is another piece, right? So this piece inside has 2 more pieces, one row and a one text, and then it's a row. Here we have a column, right? 3 columns here, and then each column has 3 rows, icon, text, and a text. You see how this is broken down? So everything is made out of rows and columns. Okay. And then for alignment, okay, I spoke about main axis. For a row, main axis is horizontal. For a column, main axis is vertical, right? So there is another one called cross axis. For a row, cross axis is vertical. For a column, cross axis is horizontal. So they change according to whether you are talking about a row or column. Now, for example, if I want to, now in my case, right, my main axis is centered, actually space even, but I didn't do anything for the cross axis. So if I go here and say cross axis alignment, dot baseline, center, end, start, stretched. Okay, when I say center, let's see what happens. No, it's not there. Let's say stretch. Okay, cross axis is not getting stretch. Let's say center here. right? I need to get to this. So anyways, so the point here is depending on the row or the column, your axis name are changing. For row, it is this way, column, it is this way. Okay. Now, also, going back to the object orientation, we learned about enumerators. Remember enumerators? So enumerators are very easy to use because these are enumerators, isn't it? So rather than giving numbers. So if I open this up, let's have a look at the documentation, what it says. Right. So this is the cross alignment enumerator. We know it's an enumerator. And the values of that enumerator: start, end, center, stretch, or stretch. Let's see. No. So these are the features. So now this documentation, by the way, now this is not Flutter, by the way, this is Flutter. I mean, sorry, not Dart, but Flutter. Okay. Each one has their own way of doing things. So we need to go study these things thoroughly. So that's on the row side. Now on the column side, we have a very similar application here. Oh, what am I doing? Could I use center on top of the column or the row, right? So if I want to, okay, let me remove this guy. If I want to center the row, I could have put this inside a center. Did you notice how I brought it into center? So the row is now centered here, right? I just brought the row inside the center. So center has a child and I plug the row into that child. So that way I got the row centered. By the way, you also see this blue color line coming up because it's a suggestion. It says, it's not an error. It says use constant with the constructor to improve performance. Because now putting constant will make things faster. So it improves the speed of rendering. So let's see whether I can put it here. Now see, everything's gone. All the blue lines are gone. No change in my visualization, but just by adding this one word, constant, because it make it a constant. So it becomes faster. Right. Now, oh, by the way, this is column also. So if I simply change the row into column, see what happens. I change the row into column. I get the other way around, ABC, right? Main axis alignment is space evenly, I put. So that's why it's taking up as much as possible space, right? So again, it is centered. So you can either have a column or a row like this. So anyways, let me go back here. So yeah, this is the example. So my last one is about building a custom reusable widget. Now, what does that mean? Something that I can build, because we are using object orientation. I can use a class, and that class can be reused everywhere. So here, I'm going to use something called the reusable card. Okay, it's a card widget, which when I finish will look like this. I can use multiple cards. So rather than giving all these text and whatever for every unit, I can create one card and then reuse it everywhere. So this is the code to create that card. Okay, if you notice, the name of the class is reusable card, and it extends a stateless widget. Next week we talk about stateless and stateful widgets. And here's the constructor. These are the properties. This is again very simple object orientation, isn't it? That's why I did Dart first before coming to Flutter. So why do we have final? Because we don't want any children to change this. So I have color, widget, I have function. So these are the classes I'm using within this. And this function is actually called onTap, and you notice there's a question mark. That means it's nullable, right? So all these concepts we discussed previously under Dart. So here's the usual constructor. I need values for my properties, isn't it? So these two are required, color and widget, but the onTap is not required. So it's just there. And then I'm overriding my build method of the widget. So here I have something called the gesture detector. What does that mean? It can detect our clicks because we want this tapping, right? We need to detect that. And if that happens, if you notice, I'm having a container here. To that, I'm giving some margin space and padding space. Okay. So margin, I'm giving edge inset 10 pixels. For padding also, I'm giving 20 pixels. And then I have a decoration where I'm changing the background color and the text color. And then I have, if there are any other child I want to plug into my reusable card, I can do that also. So this is a very simple widget I just created. And then to use that, I need to insert that here, import it rather. And when I import it, I can use that component. So now look at this. Center, column, children, reusable card. Again, another reusable card. So to this card, I'm passing color blue and the text card 1. Here, color red, card 2. Right? So let me see if I can open that. Yes, custom widget. There we go. So I have actually 3 cards. Let me remove this card. Show you without the third one. So there we go. We are using 2 cards, right? So I'm changing information. So here also I can change the colors. So I can customize my component. Okay. Right. So what did we cover today? So we looked at starting up with Flutter as a Hello World application. We looked at how the rendering happened, which is a very important lesson. I will share this document. There are lots of learning resources available here. So please go here and see how things are done. Next week, we are going to look at stateful widget. Today, I'll give you some exercises, basically, something to do with this, where you break it down and then design different component pieces as rows and columns. Next week, let me also show you what we're planning to do next week. Where is this one? Okay. We will design a useful application. I have a Figma file for you for that. Okay. So we will design this next week. So this is going to be a useful application. We'll do this in 2 pieces. Where in first one, we don't need the bottom navigation. The second one, we will have the bottom navigation, because this requires a few more advanced things like state and also routing. So I will do it in 2 steps. First step is where you will have 2 input boxes and then press the calculate and then get the BMI. In the second one, you can click the information, which will take you to another screen where it shows what is BMI. And when you press calculator, it comes back to the screen. Okay. But for now, please make sure that you install Flutter properly and play around with it. So these are the areas we discussed today: anatomy, widgets, composition, rendering model, layouts, scaffold. We looked at hello world and also layout management, and then custom reusable widgets. All right. So I guess you have a good foundation now to start playing with Flutter. Think about an application. So I'm doing something very useful. We will try this on multiple platforms, also on a mobile phone itself and also as a browser application. So start thinking about various ideas that you can use for your application. All right, so I shall see you next week.